So did everyone have, even if it was just momentary, an experience of a peaceful abiding during your meditation?
Yeah, very momentary.
I had it earlier this afternoon. Tonight, I'm feeling a little tired.
I can describe what I was doing. It's like looking up a leaking boat. You're either breathing you're forcing yourself to breathe too heavy, so you kind of relax that, and then something else happens, like you have you make a noise when you breathe in your head or something like that, so you push that, and then your mind goes to something else with the breathing, and it's like plugging up a hole, like a leaking boat. You put your finger in here, put your finger in there, and hope to.
That's great.
That's how I was constantly. That's what I was doing for 20 minutes.
Good. That's meditation. That's what's arising. And for someone that doesn't like metaphor, that was a pretty good metaphor. And we kind of had this discussion a little earlier too. Meditation is just like that. And when we start having expectations, we have to remember that those expectations are fabricated, as what the Buddha will teach here and in the other suttas. Never to judge yourself harshly for being caught in a fabrication. Just recognize it. Again, we'll address this a little bit more detail, and just come back to the sensation of breathing. And in that way, you are teaching your mind not to be distracted. Another word for that is your deepening concentration. And the reason why I pointed that out is that these jhanas are often portrayed as something that only experienced long-term meditators might have the ability to develop, but it's beyond most human beings. You all just had it, and we're ordinary meditators here, even though we're using an extraordinary meditation system. There's nothing spectacular, there's nothing extraordinary about developing these ever deeper levels of jhana, or the Buddha wouldn't have taught it. Remember, he taught a Dhamma that any human being who was interested could take to it, and through wholehearted engagement with it, develop what he described as an awakened human being. In this sutta, again, I think it's the fifth or the sixth. I won't get into the introduction, but I did read the whole introduction last Saturday's class, I think. And that's important to keep this in context. In this sutta, the Buddha addresses jhana from a direct question from one of the members of the Sangha. And he addresses this from the point of view of the three feelings of pleasure, feelings of pain, and the feelings of neither pleasure nor pain, or ambiguity, and how that relates to fabrications. And he doesn't mention it here, but you remember that dependent origination states, what the Buddha awakened to states, that from ignorance as a requisite condition comes fabrications. And from that initial chain, it ends up in all manner of suffering. And you'll see how the Buddha ties that in with this important question. And again, relates this all the way back to our meditation cushion. On one occasion, a certain monk went to the Buddha with a question. Upon arrival, he bowed and sat to one side. Great teacher, just now in seclusion, the thought occurred to me. You speak of three types of feelings. There is a feeling of pleasure, a feeling of pain, and a feeling that is neither pleasure or pain. And that last experience of neither pleasure nor pain, that kind of ambiguous state, is where most of us spend our lives. But while we're in that state, we're always seeking for distraction, meaning we're seeking what will give us pleasure, and we're concerned about finding something that might take away from the pleasure. So all of those three feelings, and the Buddha will address that. The reason why I'm saying this now, the Buddha addresses that really as one essential feeling. Then you said, the monk continues, then you said that whatever feeling arises, they are all stressful. In what connection did you state this? There's a spelling. The Buddha responds, excellent question, my friend, excellent question. I have spoken of these three feelings of pleasure, pain, and neither pleasure nor pain. I have also stated that whatever feeling arises, they are all stressful. I have stated this in connection to fabrications. Fabrications are impermanent. It is the nature of fabrications to arise and pass away and to change. It is in connection to fabrications that I stated that whatever feeling arises, they are all stressful. So again, you see in a very broad but also very specific way, it's a teaching on impermanence, isn't it? Fabrications arise and pass away. Feelings of pleasure, pain, and neither pleasure nor pain arise and pass away constantly. When we identify with that, the second factor of the three marks of existence, anatta, when we identify with these things, meaning we want them, because now they're us, stress arises. Do you see the utter simplicity that the Buddha is teaching here? We get caught up in things that are impermanent, and through self-identification, we try to make them permanent, and they're all stress-inducing.
Is the word dukkha so complex that the word stressful, maybe the better word would be unsatisfactory because it is impermanent?
Yes. Yeah, and you're right. The next long series is going to be on different applications of dukkha, but it probably won't be for another 6 months. Dukkha covers the entire gambit of any type of disappointing, unsatisfactory, stressful experience. Anything. So that could be just a minor disappointment to extreme physical and emotional pain. But probably using the word stressful is the best description. But it's certainly unsatisfactory is too, isn't it? You know, when I'm
almost more direct.
stressful or
dissatisfaction.
Yeah, disappointment.
Especially in feelings.
It is because
we're looking for satisfaction all the time.
And whatever one of those feelings is present, there's disappointment attached to it, isn't it? Even if it's pleasure, there's disappointment because it's got to end. And if it's unpleasure,
Yeah.
that's disappointing. And that ambiguous state is always disappointing to a mind seeking distraction and constant stimulation, isn't it? So all three feelings are stressful. And they're stressful not because of the feelings themselves, it's because the feelings are rooted in fabrications. They're rooted in a perversion of the true nature of human life. Did you have a question, Frank?
I was just thinking about the word dukkha, what David said, and I heard it explained from a Buddhist scholar that the word dukkha relates back to the Buddhist time where it was the hub of a wheel. And he talked about if the wheel wasn't lined up right and the axle and everything didn't work around the axle, it created a bumpy ride. So they used the word dukkha to describe the bumpy ride of an axle wheel.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And that the notion of a wheel is used often in similes and metaphor during the Buddhist time too. Well, let me continue. Whatever feeling arises, they are all stressful, the Buddha continues. Furthermore, I have also taught the step-by-step process of the cessation of fabrications. Here's the step-by-step. When a Dhamma practitioner has attained the first jhana, speech falls away, and this meaning including internal dialogue. There's another sutta on jhana that I probably won't teach in the series, where it relates noble silence to the first jhana. And a noble silence is also relates to this internal dialogue of inner, or lack of an internal dialogue, simply at peace. When a Dhamma, next part of this, the next step, when a Dhamma practitioner has attained the second jhana, directed thought and evaluation falls away. So in the other descriptions, the first jhana is described usually as taking pleasure in the seclusion, in the initial phase. But also, as we begin our meditation and we become mindful of the breath in the body, thoughts arise and pass away. We come back to the sensation of breathing. What the Buddha is describing here is the cessation of that internal dialogue in the first jhana. And of course, that all takes place in seclusion. Clear? Good. When a Dhamma practitioner has attained the third jhana, rapture falls away. These are very simple explanations of different levels of jhana. Next Tuesday and Saturday, I'm going to teach it both classes, is the Rahogata Sutta, where the Buddha uses Sariputta as an example, much like the Anapanasati Sutta, but specific to meditation. He uses Sariputta as an example of these ever deepening levels, and he goes into much more detail into each level. But you see how these all relate to simply developing deeper concentration. When a Dhamma practitioner has attained this third jhana, rapture falls away. When a Dhamma practitioner has attained the fourth jhana, intentional or directed in and out breathing has passed away. That's not mentioned in the other descriptions of jhana, but again, it does talk about the directed thought and evaluation falls away. So this fourth jhana is simply an experience of breathing without the need to remind ourselves to breathe. Some people described it as, and I don't really like the description, but I'll use it as that you're being breathed. In other words, it's just a natural, you're being breathed, meaning it's just a natural occurrence within your body. The other description, and the more common description of that fourth jhana, is a pleasant abiding. But think about that. There's no, a pleasant abiding in that sense is there's nothing left to direct anything. It's simply a deeper level of that third jhana, isn't it?
It's the intentional part.
Yes. Yes, and that intentional part is part of a meditation practice, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Until it's no longer necessary. Clear? Good. My comments here. The mind, now united with the body, rests in equanimity or a pleasant abiding. The Buddha continues. When a Dhamma practitioner has attained the fabricated, my word there, fabricated, when a Dhamma practitioner has attained the dimension of infinite space, the perception of form passes away. That's good and bad, isn't it? Because in this case, it's the mind is now out of the body in chasing after this experience of infinite space or the other ones. When a Dhamma practitioner has attained the fabricated dimension of infinite space, the perception of form passes away. When a Dhamma practitioner has attained the fabricated dimension, the word fabricated is not in the sutta. I'm putting it in there for clarity. The fabricated dimension of infinite consciousness, the perception of the dimension of infinite space passes away. Notice the progression. These aren't levels that are higher levels to achieve. They're all fabricated levels that and not necessarily a progression from one to the other either. In other words, infinite consciousness could seem to appear before infinite space, and none of these need appear. Anytime we find ourselves established in a non-physical realm, however we find ourselves, it might be we're meditating. I once had a meditation. I remember that because it was so powerful. In fact, I was on a job site on a roof up in Chester, New Jersey. I still remember this. And it was it was a nice spot. I was out in the woods and I felt like nobody's around. I was just checking things out. Nice place to meditate. So I sat down on the roof, and after a few minutes, it's just like the description is often good. My mind opened up and I felt like I was just one with and it was really I still feel it. It was just a wonderful, remarkable experience, but I was no longer in my body. And again, it was wonderful, but it was I established myself in a non-physical place that was simply a distraction. And that's why there was pleasure in it. There was nothing, no reality there. I certainly wasn't well concentrated in that point, but it's something that for a while I wanted to, in fact, I remember make an excuse to go back to that same person and go up on the roof again. It didn't work. Excuse me. I check this, make sure this is still working. Okay. So all of these, we talked about this earlier, all of these dimensions, even though the words might sound appealing or of some type of higher realm, they're all just fabricated. And none of them are something that we should strive for. The Buddha continues. Well, and let me go back to what the Buddha just said and I just read. The dimension of when a practitioner has attained the dimension of infinite consciousness, the perception of the dimension of infinite space passes away. If you look at the previous attainment of infinite space and you're hanging on to it as an achievement, now you just lost the achievement, isn't it? Because it passed away, because now you're in another fabricated state. They're all impermanent. They're all prone to disappointment. They're all prone to one or all of those three feelings at the same time. When a Dharma practitioner has attained the fabricated dimension of nothingness, the perception of the dimension of infinite consciousness passes away. Do you see how we're grasping after these different dimensions, and we're, rather than steadying our mind, we're going from one fabricated state to another, and we're, depending on where we learn to do this, we think it's achievement. And again, these were common terms during the Buddhist time, but anytime we use meditation to establish ourselves in some type of non-physical realm, we're doing just this. Yes, Frank?
Is it possible that your mind or your brain doesn't even go there?
Oh, yeah.
Like, I have a very simple brain. Like, I don't even think I'm capable of thinking of all that stuff.
Yeah, you're lucky. And that's not even the right word. You're not lucky. You're well focused. But the reason why this is taught, well, I'm teaching it, and it's taught so often, that it's a very common experience for many people to do this, and not just establishing yourself in infinite space or infinite consciousness, et cetera, et cetera. Anytime you find yourself established in a non-physical way, you're doing this. You're doing something that is simply rooted in fabrications. And it doesn't necessarily happen either. When I teach the Pariyasana Sutta, these different dimensions were taught by his two most significant teachers, and the Buddha realized it, mastered these dimensions very quickly, and realized this is not it, and so he left those teachers and left their dharmas behind. When a Dharma practitioner has attained the fabricated dimension of neither perception nor non-perception, the perception of the dimension of nothingness passes away. Again, the impermanence of it. When a Dharma practitioner has recognized and abandoned these qualities, and the quality doesn't necessarily mean that there's a good quality to it. It's just a quality of mind, a temporary quality of mind. When a Dharma practitioner has recognized and abandoned these qualities, they have attained the cessation of perception and feelings. Going back to the evaluation of my feelings and what's occurring in my mind. Now, from going through these, whether we actually had the experience or not, but abandoning them is the important point here, we have reached the cessation of perception and feelings rooted in ignorance. When these unskillful mental, the Buddha continues, when these unskillful mental qualities have ended, greed, aversion, and delusion have ended, the three defilements. So he takes us through in this sequence, deepening concentration through the four jhanas, and then if we happen to find ourselves either intentionally or unintentionally in a non-physical plane of existence or awareness, to go through them and come back to the sensation of breathing. And in so doing, over and over again with our meditation practice, we will come to the end of the defilements. The Buddha continues. Furthermore, I have also taught the step-by-step process of the stilling of fabrications or the cessation of fabrications. When a Dhamma practitioner has attained the first jhana, speech has been stilled, and most importantly, the internal dialogue. When a Dhamma practitioner has attained the second jhana, directed thought and evaluation has stilled. That, notice here, I'm pointing this out now because I'll go through this sequence, but in a slightly different way, because there's first a stilling of evaluation, thought, speech, etc., internal dialogue, and then from that stilling comes a calming, what the Buddha described as an awakened mind. When a Dhamma practitioner has attained the third jhana, rapture has been stilled. When a Dhamma practitioner has attained the fourth jhana, in and out breathing has been stilled. He's certainly not saying that we stop breathing. It's just the intention behind that breathing has stilled. When a Dhamma practitioner has attained the fabricated dimension of the infinite space, the perception of form has been stilled. And I won't go through all of that again. But for each one of those fabricated states, the Buddha talks about stilling each one of those. And he wouldn't talk about stilling them if there was something that we should achieve, would he? He would teach that once you get there, boy, you should really hang on to it and cultivate it. When a Dhamma practitioner has attained the cessation of perception and feelings have been stilled. When these unskillful mental qualities have ended, greed, aversion, and delusion have also been stilled. So there's first an abandoning of the striving, and then there's the recognition of that, which results in a stilling of the of the internal craving. Is that clear? That's the reference to stilling. So the Buddha is teaching in a very methodical and detailed way, this step-by-step way, how a mind goes from distracted to recognizing the distraction, the fabrication causing it, to intentionally, through being mindful of the breath and the body in the right framework, stilling those fabrications. And there's still more to be done. In these next two classes, the next one on Saturday, can't think of the name of it right now, it's actually taught by Ananda, where he goes through the sequence of referencing the jhana, but then understanding there's still a deeper level of concentration. The Buddha does the same thing when he uses Sariputta as an example. There's still a deeper level of concentration. Now, friend, there are these 6 profound calmings. My commentary here, the culmination of the cessation of fabrications. The Buddha consistently described the quality of mind of one awakened as calm. You've heard me say that over and over again. But it's a profound measure of equanimity. Number 1, when a Dhamma practitioner has attained the first jhana, speech has been calmed. And think about that, how when we begin our meditation practice, related to the 4 foundations of mindfulness, being mindful of the breath and the body, even if it's just for an instant, that internal dialogue has calmed, isn't it? That's the first jhana. And the only difference between someone who's been meditating for a week and someone who's been effectively meditating for years is that first jhana is usually experienced as soon as you start meditating, and it tends to last. It brings up something I want to talk about. I was thinking about it while I was meditating earlier. The usefulness of this practice now is on your cushion to recognize these deeper levels of jhana. And so has anybody been doing that, recognizing coming through these or these deepening levels of jhana and having the experience of it? Because it's okay to think about it. Now, am I in the first jhana? But what I noticed about myself is simply the pleasant abiding that I'm very aware of.
Couldn't that be a distraction to your meditation also, because now you've achieved goals?
Yeah, well, that's the skillful caution, and that's where the framework comes in. To not see it as an achievement, but simply to recognize that, and this is one of the reasons why the Buddha teaches this, is so that you have a reference point for that your meditation practice is actually beneficial and effective.
I tend to think about it afterwards in reflection rather than as I'm meditating, because then I would get distracted, like, oh, is that 50% of the time I was there? Is that
Well, yeah, there's
minute, and I'm evaluating, I'm scoring, I've got a spreadsheet going.
Yeah, and so there's and when you do that, but thank you for bringing that up, Helen, because it's so important. So you have developed at least to the 3rd jhana, a pleasant abiding, but then you had a thought. You're back in the 2nd jhana, aren't you?
Yeah.
You're evaluating it. And so it's not right or wrong. But in fact, I would say it's important to even recognize that, so that you see that I don't have to evaluate this. I can just rest in this pleasant abiding. Another reason why the Buddha taught this is so we have a direction and understand what it means to deepen concentration. It's one thing to say it, isn't it? I give you this practice. I give you a Shamatha-Vipassana meditation. Be mindful of your breath and your body. You get caught up in your thoughts, come back to your breath. You do this to deepen concentration. But without a framework, you can easily get caught up in the evaluation until you recognize that I'm simply where I need to be in this pleasant abiding. So when you can do that, you have now, instead of bouncing back into the 2nd jhana of evaluation and directed thought, you allowed yourself to deepen into that 4th jhana of a more deeper and pure pleasant abiding. And that just continues. So again, the reason why I'm saying this is to recognize this in your Dhamma practice, in your meditation practice, without getting caught up into the achievement or the evaluation of it. Just recognize it. And again, I think you can, by the Buddha's clear words, and again, it's a translation, but he never gives you any attaboys from going from one, oh, that's it. in fact, the only attaboy he gives this monk is the question was an excellent question. And the rest is just, this is an ordinary Dhamma practice. This is a step-by-step process. It's just brilliant. Thank you, Hel. When a Dhamma practitioner has attained the first jhana, speech has been calmed. When a Dhamma practitioner has attained the second jhana, directed thought and evaluation have calmed. From stilling to calming.
Oh,
Yes.
Just my question. So why have we gone from stilling to calming?
They're
Because I like the stilling. It's
Ah.
I like
the stilling is more of a recognition of the culmination of your intention. I hope I'm not parsing words too closely here or too sharply. It's simply recognizing the progression from a fabricated experience to a stilling of the fabrications. And from the stilling of the fabrications comes a mind that is resting in calm. There's no provocation anymore. The provocation is from fabrication to stilling, from stilling to a deeper level of calm.
So the stilling is actually an action.
Yes, look, think about it this way. Another great question. You're coming up to a red light. You step on the brake to still the car. While you're waiting there, the car is calm, isn't it? So there's still a provocation in stilling. There's still a deepening level of concentration. Great fine points. Is that clear though to everyone?
Okay.
And it's an important distinction.
It's not clear in the description or in the sort of the difference between those two things. You have to kind of,
Yeah, I saw the distinction when I was reading it. I see the stilling as an action, and calm as where you're resting.
Yep. And to go back to that metaphor, the use of the process itself is putting on the brakes. You know,
is this the difference between coming and being?
Wow.
That's
That's a great question. And in relation to that, into the three primary teachings on becoming and also just what we know, that awakened state of calm is still in a process of you can say that it's still in a process of becoming, but there's nothing left to provoke becoming further ignorant. So it is a state of, how do I put it? It's a state of non-static, or it's a state of dynamic being. Because often that state of I'm just being has a connotation of being static.
Oh, yeah,
And certainly there's nothing static
I don't
about.
see it that way. Like being as just being where you are, and you could be like running down the road and
Yes.
be
Yep. And in that calm
in a calm state.
mind of equanimity. Yes, that's such a good point.
And that's the
Lately,
state
I've
you'll
been
see.
looking at becoming thing as the opposition between coming and being, where becoming always there's goal left. In being, there's no goal left.
Becoming
Yes.
is a verb and being is like a noun.
Yeah.
Like-
Yeah.
Close to it, yeah.
And
It's like splitting hairs, I think, on the. I mean, it's like being is still doing something. It is just it is.
yeah,
You're just,
It is what you're doing.
is. You know what I mean? It is what it is.
and so there's a point in this process, whether it's attaining the fourth jhana, but in an impermanent state. In other words, in our meditation session, we're able to access that. The argument, I don't want to get into it, the argument we made, well, you haven't reached the fourth jhana if it's not permanent, but that's not how the Buddha teaches it. But off our cushion, we can't take that pleasant abiding, that calm abiding off our cushion all the time. So we're out of that. But in the process of awakening, we're still at that point, we're still in the process of becoming awakened. Once we're awakened, our minds are at peace, but it doesn't mean that the world around us or our experience is always peaceful. We might be an awakened human being and a hurricane hits. We're still able to maintain a calm and peaceful mind with 150 mile an hour winds, which means we'll probably react in a better way. But you see the difference? So there's a process of awakening that is gradual. It's step by step, as the Buddha teaches, but it's also important. And this is another way of saying it's important to recognize what's there and also what's not there. It's important to recognize the progress. So, and then we don't get caught up in the goal of, well, I'm not there yet. Understand, and this is an aspect of right effort, understand that the efforts that you are engaged with are bearing great fruit, great benefit right here and right now, even though we're not at that awakened state. And that just simply helps encourages us, doesn't it? To keep going. David, you had a question or a comment that I would love to hear.
It's only in those states of equanimity that you'll have that insight to the three marks. Everything else before that might be an intellectual level.
Yes.
But it's only when you're truly calm and that's why I've been fascinated by the 7 factors. I know it's not a step-by-step thing, but the last factor is equanimity.
Yeah.
And that's when you'll have that true insight to 3 marks.
Yeah. Well, the most profound insight into the 3 marks. And again, you're describing the whole point of insight within the Buddha's Dhamma is into the 3 marks.
That's appropriate concentration. The point of it all is to have that insight.
Yeah, and it's insight into true and useful knowledge as it applies to the Dhamma. You know, if you want to learn to be a history professor, insight into the 3 marks isn't really going to help you much, is it? Even you could study and learn, you could gain an understanding of that, but it wouldn't make you a very good history teacher, would it? If you want to awaken, though, studying history and becoming a master at teaching history isn't any good either, is it? It's very specific. So the Dhamma is, in that way, is not to, it's not to give us an understanding of the entire cosmos coming into being and the whole meaning of, in a cosmological way, of life. It's how to understand the problem of suffering and the distraction associated with suffering. It's to understand what ignorance of 4 noble truths results in. And we gain an understanding of the 4 noble truths through understanding the 3 marks of existence. Everything the Buddha taught was to gain insight in that way. And and isn't it interesting that in order to understand impermanence, my mind has to be calm. In order to understand the not self characteristic, meaning wrong views that I'm using to describe a self, I have to have a calm mind. I can't be churning out what I am in this moment and what can I attach myself to? What am I identified? I have to calm my mind and let go of that compulsive need for constant self-establishment and self-identification. That's what the Buddha is pointing out here too. Great question. All right, let me continue. When a Dhamma practitioner has attained the 3rd jhana, rapture has been calmed. When a Dhamma practitioner has attained the 4th jhana, in and out breathing has been calmed. Again, the Buddha's not saying you stop breathing. There's no reference to it. There's no attachment to it. You're simply breathing in a completely non-referential self, which means I'm not aware of my breathing. I'm just mindful of it. There's a difference there, isn't there? There's no thought or evaluation, going back to the progression of the jhanas. The Buddha continues, these are those 6. When a Dhamma practitioner has attained the cessation of perception and feeling have been calmed. Think about all the difficulties in our mind, all the conflict in our mind arises from one of those 2 ways, which is really the same thing. It's from how I'm perceiving my experience and the resulting feeling that I'm having about it. And an awakened human being has lost that provocation towards perception and feeling. It has calmed. A step-by-step process too. Why is that so? Why am I emphasizing? Why is the Buddha emphasizing the step-by-step process? because it's something that we can do. There's a step-by-step process towards awakening. It's framed by the Eightfold Path. And then there's specific, you could say that there's specific tasks to accomplish within that, and the Buddha is describing that here. Number 6, when a Dhamma practitioner's effluents have ended, greed, aversion, and deluded thinking have ended, passion has been calm, aversion has been calm, delusion has been calm, the 3 defilements. They're calm. They're no longer provoking us towards anything. Remember the fire discourse? Everyone here has been on retreat except Russ. You might have, hopefully, you might have come across it on the website. In the fire discourse, the Buddha teaches that how dukkha arises from passion, and almost it's a worship of passion, the way he describes it in that. So the cessation of passion, the calming of passion, brings an awakened mind. My comments here, because the Buddha doesn't reference that right directly here, and it's important. There is no mention here of non-physical dimensions, as they have been abandoned by stilling the mind. This shows that striving for these fabricated experiences results only in continued distraction, furthering ignorance of Four Noble Truths. It's the end of the sutta. Thank you for listening. That last, again, is just to emphasize the point, to engage in Shamatha-Vipassana meditation for the sole purpose that the Buddha taught it, which is to deepen concentration. But even that is not enough to understand the depth of concentration, is it? We have to know, because even finding yourself sitting on a rooftop in Chester, New Jersey, and opening up to the whole cosmos feels pretty calm if you don't have the right perspective, does it? And actually, when I think about it now, even more, I realize it even more now sitting here. It was quite an agitated state, but it felt so good.
Exciting.
Yeah. And I wish I could, but it literally was an experience of being one with everything that is in creation. Of course, all I could see was the fruit trees in front of me, but it was an astonishing experience, so much so that I'm still talking about it. And it was one of the major distractions up until that time in my life. I chased after it for a while. And it's that type of thing that the Buddha is referring to in these rather archaic references to infinite space and neither perception nor non-perception. It's just when we find ourselves established in any type of non-physical experience, even if it's just that probably should have started there. Daydreaming is a good example of that. We're thinking about, what your experience might be when you're finally awakened and what that would feel like. Well, that's an experience that's going on in your head, isn't it? It's a non-physical experience. And so during the Buddhist time, continued to this day, we put labels on those non-physical experiences because they feel so good and they seem like attainment when they're just another fabrication. And that's the importance of all this. And then the other part of it that I mentioned is to notice these. Take time in your meditation practice to recognize as you're passing through these different levels. But as Helen brought up, don't do it as to the point of distraction. Just recognize it. And it's okay to say, or to recognize in this moment, I'm in a pleasant abiding. And if you start evaluating it or trying to figure out how you got there, just come back to the sensation of breathing. Excuse me. So we'll go around the room, but is there any questions specifically about this sutta? No? Start with Lorna. Lorna, good to see you tonight.
Thank you. Good to be here. I think looking at the jhanas has made me look at my distractions in my head more clearly, which is the opposite of the jhanas. The purpose of the jhanas, I suppose, is
No, but the comparison allows you to see that. So that's important to
it's
bring
the
that up.
understanding that you get from the teachings that make you more able to analyze your own thinking, I guess you could say. And I think these past weeks have helped me do that, which I think is good and useful to my practice. But again, nothing to be hung up about. You know, we all have distractions. I'm no different to anybody else. You know, so don't get hung up about it. But
Yep.
just, you know, you can just understand it a little bit more.
Yeah. Thank you. That again, that's the whole point. So we can understand what we're doing a little bit more. You know, Ram, good to see you.
Yeah, it's quite a ride. These jhanas, and it just it gets me to again look at the things I'm banging up against doing meditation, and I've realized that there's it actually I'm almost like out of the starting gates. I almost stopped dead right there. I realized that there's a certain amount of indulgence going on with the distractions that I come up with.
Yeah.
And so which is why I've been, getting to see the jhanas come up and fall away. It's a little tricky for me because I'm kind of holding back right from the beginning. So I'm looking now into, okay, where's this indulgence coming from, and where do I go with that?
Yeah. Oh. Thank you for that. That's an aspect of clinging, isn't it? Indulging in it, and it's
a hell of a lot of clinging going on there.
Yeah, and it's so important to recognize. Just to recognize, not it's not you're not doing something wrong. I would say you're doing something right by recognizing it.
Right.
That's the important thing. And again, this looking at it, much like Lorna said, knowing the framework then allows us to see, much like the Eightfold Path allows us to see when we're out of right view or out of right speech. We need the framework to recognize it. Yeah. Understanding the jhanas in this way gives us the framework for recognizing where we're going in our meditation and to fine tune it. And, something else that I probably should say, and Helen brought it up, this should not be taken as something to strive for. That's why the Buddha teaches it, or else it does become something heavy, doesn't it? Something we must do. I gotta do it.
I've actually gotten lightened up.
Good.
By this last series of talks.
Yeah, that is the point. That is the point. And
there is always a tendency to just say, "Oh, I'm not doing it right. I'm doing it right."
Yeah.
Why am I not doing it right? And a little self-flagellation going on, and you're down the spiral again.
Yeah, so the Buddha's instructions are very simple, aren't they? And it's really that reason. I mean, to meditate. Mm-hmm. Go find the root of a tree, an empty hut, and do jhana. What is doing jhana really mean in its simplest form? Be mindful of your breath. And when you find you're caught up in your thoughts, come back to your breath. And then notice that your concentration is deepening, that it's having the effect that it wants.
But the fact that he's talked about this so often is again an indication that he recognized how difficult this can be, like how many ways we can not do jhana.
Oh yeah, I mean, and how did he know? Because he went through this whole process himself. And the reason why I'm teaching the Pariyasana Sutta at the end of this is because now you'll see exactly how the Buddha arrived at what he arrived at. Because he went through the experiences of finding what worked and what didn't work, including being distracted by these different things that were taught as meditative achievement. And they're not. So, thank you. Okay, Frank. It's good to see you tonight. We'll see you soon.
Tell Eric good luck with his project.
Yeah. Tell Eric we all said hello. Helen, good to see you tonight.
Thank you. Good to be here. I guess in retrospect, when you're in meditation and you realize you're caught up in your thoughts, and you come back to the breath, all of that, allows it to be non-judgmental. It's just
Yeah.
You open up your awareness of where you are at that moment. You don't get hung up there. You
Yeah.
just keep on moving. And I guess that's what I've been doing. I don't judge my meditation. Closest thing to that is, maybe seeing how long I can meditate. But for the most part, the experience, I just let it unfold, and it's not something that I judge or
Yeah, good.
criticize or measure. Really, it's just maybe reflect afterwards. But yeah, I mean, so to me, and hearing Ram talk about how he's struggled, it's like, wow, I guess I didn't think about it that much. I didn't put that much thought into it. I just, I don't know, different experience.
Yeah,
I didn't overthink it.
that's good. That's kind of the point too, to just recognize where you are and keep deepening your concentration. So, step-by-step process. Thank you, Helen. David, good to see you tonight.
See you, John. I keep going back to the thought of context and the way you kind of built from the retreat through the teachings of restraint, and now the jhanas, crossing the mindfulness. And it just shows that there's a huge value coming here each week, and that it does, not that it builds, but it just keeps piling onto that context. It gives you the complete picture, and these teachings on jhana are really the master level teachings of the beginning, where you find a root of a tree or hut.
Yeah.
Because it's telling you you'll experience these things. Don't get distracted by things that aren't appropriate.
Yeah.
And you can only get that by coming and listening to your teachings. Because without it, you miss parts of it.
Yeah.
And there's value to it. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. It's another reason I think why spiritual practice, meditation practice has evolved the way it is it we're impatient. We want a quick fix, so we don't want to have to look at too many things that are very personal in nature, such as our own fabrications. So we don't do other things. So this is a very simple and direct process, but the depth of it, there's nothing else like it. It takes commitment. It takes an eightfold path rather than a one or two or a threefold path. It's not just mindfulness practice. There's an aspect of mindfulness there, and it has to be integrated in the overall context too. So we have all developed our practice long enough, far enough, that these teachings on jhana have some meaning, and hopefully a lot of meaning, as opposed to, if we were all just beginners, I probably wouldn't have taught this series even a year ago, even though I've been thinking about it for a while. And then the timing was nice, or worked out right after the retreat that some of us were on. So. And it seems like that's why I keep asking, I want to know that you're finding some benefit from these too. I'm just wasting my time. Bonnie, good to see you tonight.
Good to see you, not wasting your time.
Thank you. I didn't think I was.
I think about where I was when I first started to practice. Where I am now, it's very different.
Yeah.
Where I even had images of what my brain sort of looked like in the process of what happened when I tried to focus. And I used to it was like I had a ping pong ball in my head. And night, if I think about it, a much different process, and I think without it, it's sort of like not trying to do it, but to do it. It's sort of my breath net really did become. I wasn't thinking about it. In fact, I'm not sure where I was, but I was breathing, and then you coughed, and I was like, what happened? And it like, it snapped me right back, but I realized how like I don't have to work to focus on the breath, be aware that the thoughts are flowing. So just, I think for the most part, particularly when I come here, I have my best sit. So getting too deep for that. Not for long, but certainly I don't. It doesn't feel like work.
Yeah, that's
It doesn't
it.
feel like work anymore.
Yeah, and it I don't want to use the word it shouldn't, because it often does, especially in the beginning of practice. And that's another reason to look at it this way. And even Helen touched on it. It's not work. If you see it as achievement, it becomes work, doesn't it? But if you see it within the framework that it's presented, it's not work. It's just meditation. Thank you. Russ, good to see you tonight. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Good.
So I still consider myself a beginner. I don't know when you don't. But I thought this was really good. I got a lot out of it. Talking a lot about process of meditation, kind of what's going on. That's good to know. That's good stuff to know. Because when you're sort of flailing about trying to do some of this stuff, I thought it was great. So as a beginner, I wanted to share it with you.
Thank you.
I got a lot out of it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it is. Thank you for saying that. It's yeah, I mean, I said it before. I don't think that there's any type of advanced meditation, but there is a deeper knowledge, or an ever deepening knowledge of how to do it and how to incorporate it. And that just takes the practice. It takes, as David pointed out, it takes learning about these other things that support a meditation practice within the framework of the Eightfold Path. Pardon me?
There's advanced understanding.
Yeah, I guess so. I just don't like to. You know what? My whole involvement with modern Buddhism, the hierarchy always turned me off. I didn't understand why, and so I don't like to set up that, meaning that there's a hierarchy even within a meditation practice. But there is a development of knowledge, isn't
Just
there?
understanding them.
Yeah.
Because without it, you will flail. You will, and if you don't get those achievements, you will quit. You will quit, and that's what probably happens to many people.
Yeah, when I don't remember if it's in this in the introduction that I now put attached to each one of these Jhana articles, I touched on that if you enter into meditation as an achievement to get somewhere other than just awakening, even that is, it's always going to be frustrating, because you're entering into meditation from the point of view of I making. What is I making prone to? Dukkha, to suffering. So you're going to find and look at, I said this often, if everybody that came to class kept coming, we'd be in Madison Square Garden tonight and not here in Frenchtown. And I'm not bemoaning that. It's just the way it is. And yeah, imagine across it. So I wish it was for, I guess that's the way it is. I wish it was for everyone. The world could certainly use this, couldn't they? Couldn't the world at large? I think that's how the Buddha felt. That's why he did it. In fact, when you'll hear about that in the Aryapariyasana Sutta, he considered going out and doing this rather than, his inclination was basically, I don't want to be bothered because I don't think anybody is going to understand it. Why go through the effort? In fact, I think the words that were translated, it would be tiresome and troublesome if I do this. And then he finally agrees to go out and do it. And Bonnie.
I just think people have to be ready. You have to be ready to be still enough, even to do, whether it's I meditated before I came here, but in a very different way, or do guided meditation, or different kinds of basketball of people who, even in my own, my livelihood, there are people who they will come and say, I can't even, I'm not going to come, or I can't do this kind of workshop because I can't even close my eyes, and I remember my first time, I was like, that I went to a Buddhist, it was a day-long workshop. I was like, oh my God, I think because you really have to be willing to sort of not stop the clock, but you have to be willing in some way to sit with the discomfort of stopping and letting go of the distraction. It's like for so many people today to even just put down the phone or to disconnect from the external stuff. It's really, you have to be willing, at least for me, I had to be willing to sit with the discomfort.
Yeah, I think you're right. I kind of debate that in my head about, is there a point where some people are ready for this and you're not? Because I've said this more than once. I wish I came across me years and years ago, or at least somebody teaching like this. I know that sounds very, very self-aggrandizing. I didn't mean it that way, because I don't know that I needed to go through all that I went through to get to finding what the Buddha actually taught. You can say, well, that's just part of your path and all that.
Or maybe you needed to go through all that to find the process leads us to where we need to be.
Yeah, I mean, in that way, what I went through, what most of us go through, is very similar to what the Buddha went through too. He tried different things out and it didn't work, and he eventually came to this. But I also recognize that most of my students, if I can call you that, and I'm including online students too, the ones that are most successful in developing what the Buddha taught, and maybe the qualification is the way I teach it, are those that have very little experience in modern Buddhism. The ones that have had the most difficulty, even the ones that stayed with it, are the ones that were so conditioned by what they think Buddhism is, as opposed to what it actually is. And I went through that same struggle. And I've had many people that have tried it, even like taking the course online, and get halfway through the course and say, nah, this is all nonsense. My teacher says this and my teacher says that, meaning from different schools. I'm not arguing with that, but
unlearning is harder.
That's the simple way of saying it. It is. Even for years and years, and not years and years, for quite a while, a couple of years after I started studying the Buddhist teaching, I was still found myself mixing in other things that I learned, and it was really hard to get through all that. But again, similar to what the Buddha taught. It's not for everyone. It'd be nice if it was, but the most important thing, and I say it here often, is that we have found a true refuge in something that works for us. And that's really all that really matters.
Yeah. Doesn't the Buddha describe what people he's teaching to as those with just a little bit of dust on their mirror? Yeah,
you'll hear it in a couple of weeks. Yeah, that was, if there's just the legend or the non-physical metaphor is that this Brahmin comes down to Buddha while he was considering going out and teaching, and he kind of talked himself out, and the Brahmin comes down and says, well, I know there's a few people out there with just a little dust in their eyes, meaning it doesn't take much to clear their vision. And so in that way, you should go out and teach. And of course, I see that as just what the Buddha's considering in a well-concentrated mind. And he realized this on his own. And so you heard me say over and over again, the Buddha didn't see himself as a savior. He didn't see himself teaching a salvific religion. He went out simply to teach anybody that was ready to hear it, much like Helen said. Not what Bonnie said, you got to be ready. So there's got to be something to that. Great class. There's a few more on Jhana, so I hope it's not getting boring at all. They're kind of building. I think you'll find, well, Saturday's class will be a teaching from Ananda to a householder, and then next Tuesday and next Saturday will be on the same sutta where the Buddha is using Sariputta as an example of how to do this, and then we'll finish. Yeah, I mean, I think it's building, and I think the sequencing was worked out pretty well anyway. All right, we'll finish with Metta as we always do. So, a couple of announcements. One is the Donna dinner's coming up. I invited the mayor. He put me on to inviting the borough council, particularly the president, who was very helpful in this Galassos fire. I can't remember her name. And we're also going to invite the first responders, so we might have a large crowd. I could use some help in just the logistics and a few other things. So if any of you can help, send me an email. It's not a lot,
Is
but
that like maybe the 20th?
the 20th, Tuesday of Thanksgiving week. All right, let's finish with Metta as we always do. So again, find your relaxed meditation posture. Gently close your eyes, gently close your mouth, and take a moment to become mindful of the sensation of breathing in your body. And these are the Buddha's words on Metta from the Karaniya Metta Sutta. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud or demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. Radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will. Whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Thank you all for a wonderful class tonight. Peace.